Hello, everybody. We are back from our 4th of July layoff.
It's about
bringing
time.
you episode 18. Hey, man, I had to travel a little bit.
You travel too much.
I went across, I think, 6 states in the span of 4 days.
Substitutes for you.
Hey, we can always do that baseball podcast that you would contribute 2% to, and it'd be, yeah.
It would be great.
I like him. Theo Epstein's good. Wait, the Cubs aren't good this year? Ooh.
Is Josh Beckett still good?
I'm sure he's a very solid businessman in whatever endeavor he's doing post baseball.
How about oh gosh, never mind. I was
can't remember anyone else.
I was gonna say Tim's their knuckleballer from back in the
Tim
day.
Wakefield?
Yeah, Tim Wakefield.
He's probably 50 at this point.
He could probably still throw a dirty knuckleball.
Oh, he probably can, man. Oh, on our team, we have a guy who's a left-handed knuckleballer that throws sidearm. It is fun to watch.
All right. He needs to get called up quick.
Hey, he might be. I don't know. It's definitely fun. Bless you.
Excuse me.
How dare you interrupt our podcast with that?
At least I didn't do it into the microphone.
That is very true.
That would have been gross.
All
right. So remember about how the last time we had the show, we said, yeah, we're going to try not to talk about the NBA too much. Well, guess what? We lied again.
Yeah, we're really good at lying about cutting back on NBA.
I don't remember the NBA offseason being so action-packed before. There's a ton going on and a ton that we need to talk about.
So we're starting off with OTAs.
No. See, and that's the difference. I love football. It's my favorite sport, but transactions and the offseason,
it's pretty weak.
There's nothing going on. I mean, I guess because in the NFL you don't have stars moving really.
And then when you think about it, a lot of the stars, by the time they're 4 or 5 years into the league, they aren't stars anymore.
Because age is such a big deal. For example, a lot of the guys in the NBA we're going to talk about are 30 plus. In the NFL, unless you're a quarterback, once you're 30 plus, you're no longer a superstar. You're starting to drop.
Or a kicker, or maybe a guard or something.
Or yeah, like a O lineman. Because this NFL offseason, there were a ton of offensive lineman moves. Who cares?
I think, yeah, that's pretty much what it was.
Maybe that's the problem.
I think that's really
in the NBA, every position is sexy, but in the NFL, it's got to be a skill position or a quarterback.
Well, there's so many different people on rosters in the NFL, and then people don't really move. Because I forget who it was. It may have been Adnan Virk, but I'm probably giving somebody else credit for something. I don't know. But somebody said it's yeah, you know what? NBA free agency, I try not to talk about it as much and try to talk some NFL, but it's just not the same because
there's nothing going on.
Yeah, how am I going to get excited about a backup guard signing a decent contract with another team that's not good who just needed a guard? That's sorry.
We'll get heavy into football once training camps start because we'll start doing who's going to win the Super Bowl this year and who's going to win the NFC East and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But until then, it's basically just baseball going on, and it's the boring part of the baseball season. And
it's starting to heat up, though. It's getting close after the All-Star break.
Anyways, I guess every part of the baseball season is the boring part. Hey-o! Okay. Wow. And the NBA offseason, which is the second best season in the NBA. Got the playoffs first, and then the offseason, and then the regular season.
Shoot, I might put offseason ahead of playoffs. Dude, I love transactions.
I know you do,
but
come on.
It's fun to watch. It's fun to watch. It's sad for some teams and some people, but fun to watch.
Anyway, I guess we better get started, because there's a ton of players and teams we need to talk about. So who you want to start with? Were you not prepared for this question, Mr. Host?
I think I am definitely prepared for this question. And
do you want to go in order of when the moves happen, so we could start from the beginning?
We could do that. I was gonna kind of transition into something nobody would expect, but that's fine.
No transitions into nobody would expect.
Well, I was just gonna say we're gonna start with America's team, the Sacramento Kings, and talk about their moves. I feel like nobody would expect us to start with the Sacramento Kings.
Nobody cares about the Sacramento. Why don't we go in order? We probably should have hammered this out before we started recording, but that's okay. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine. Because I am ready to talk.
I mean, really, the first huge move was, Chris Paul.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Chris Paul.
Chris Paul going to the Rockets.
So, that move, the Clippers finally get a small forward that they've needed desperately for the last 5 seasons, and then they get him once Chris Paul's gone. So that's good. That's a solid move.
Great job, Doc.
Daryl Morey's really good at his job. That is what I came across. That was my initial impression. Like, he trades away Lou Williams, who's a shooter, and they have 18 of those on the team. Sam Decker, who's a prospect who knows if he'll be good or not. And who was the last guy they got?
Montrezl Harrell, and I believe DeAndre Liggins is also in that move. But I mean, it's basically a lot of people. And then he picked up all these guys to trade to the Clippers to help balance out the cap, and he basically got them for really just a little bit of cash.
That's really smart. Daryl Morey's very good at his job.
And think about the courage it takes to make all those huge moves that he's made over his career. I mean, it could really backfire, and some have, but you know what? At least he made the move.
And he's in Houston. I don't consider that like a super basketball town or a prime destination, but over the last, 7, 8, 9 years, they've gotten 3 superstars now to come to Houston. They've gotten James Harden. They got Dwight Howard, who at the time was a superstar.
Absolutely.
He was considered the best big man since Shaq. And now Chris Paul. Those are 3 big gets for superstars in their prime.
And I mean, they have had a basketball reputation in the town. Clutch City back with Kenny the Jet Smith
and Hakeem the
Drexler.
Dream.
Yeah, exactly. Those couple of years, they had some pretty good teams then. But since then, I mean, they had some good teams with Yao Ming and Tracy McGrady, but they never really got there. But what Daryl Morey's doing is making Houston a very attractive destination. I mean, most people thought Chris Paul was going to become an unrestricted free agent, potentially stay in LA and sign a supermax deal, which was on the table for him.
And that is what I thought he was going to do.
That's what everybody thought.
Really, we were all backwards. We both thought that because they couldn't afford to keep both Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, we thought they were going to choose Chris Paul.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was them not choosing Chris Paul or Chris Paul didn't choose them. But I think it's Chris Paul not choosing them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think it's the latter. I think really the relationship between him and Doc really did sour towards the end because really Doc just sat on his hands at the deadline every year. Like, they knew they needed another piece, and the clock was running out on them all, and he didn't make the move.
I think Doc Rivers is an above-average coach. I think it's clear that you can't be the president and coach of a team. You can't.
The only one who can really do it is Pop, and that's because R.C. Buford, because Pop is technically the president, but R.C. Buford makes the moves.
He's the way I imagine that situation, and nobody really knows because Pop is pretty closed doors on that kind of stuff. Is Popovich just approves everything? Yeah. R.C. Buford is doing the legwork, whereas in the Clippers organization, they were trying to have Doc Rivers do both jobs completely. It's kind of the same way in Detroit right now, which I don't think that situation's going to work out, where they're trying to have Van Gundy do most of the groundwork.
At least Van Gundy, I will give him credit, has made some pretty shrewd moves. He hasn't necessarily panned out as much, but at the time he got really Tobias Harris for nothing, and a lot of people thought Tobias Harris was a future star.
Yeah, how'd that work out?
I mean, it hasn't worked out. I mean, it's hindsight, But
yeah, I know.
At the time, it was a great move because they really traded 2 pieces who were older veterans on expiring contracts for a young potential star.
And it's tough to judge Van Gundy because they don't really have a star on that team, so how are you going to win?
And the guy who's supposed to be your star, sometimes decides to take games off, when you sign Andre Drummond, who's a 23-year-old superstar, potentially, to a max contract and pay him like a superstar, and then his next season's a dud, you're kind of hamstrung a little bit.
I think that was... It's another hindsight thing, but I don't think I would have paid Drummond that. Just seeing where the NBA's going, and Drummond pretty clearly doesn't fit in the new NBA.
I think it's kind of crazy to even think about that because a lot of the teams that we're talking about now making these really shrewd moves were all in on Drummond had he gotten out there.
There were a lot of teams
Like-
that were all in on Drummond. Absolutely. There were several teams that would have given him the max.
Like Boston was
Yeah.
definitely one of them, and now think about where Boston is compared to where they might be with Drummond. It's crazy to think about.
So it's one interesting way that I heard about how we should be judging these free agents is, can they play in the last 2 minutes of a championship game? If they can't, then why are you giving them max money? You can't put Drummond in for the last 2 minutes of a championship game. You can't. He's too much of a liability offensively. You would have to. It's sort of the same thing with the Cavs and not being able to play Tristan Thompson and Kevin Love at the same time. But all these huge big men that aren't super athletic, they're pretty much gonna die out, I think.
Right, like your guys like a Joakim Noah, people like that, just
the big guys who kind of plod around.
the lumbering big man.
And if you're a guy like Rudy Gobert, that dude's got the athleticism to at least keep up.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Thanks for saying that, by the
way. But I also wouldn't give a center like that the max. I would want my center to be more like Boogie Cousins, Anthony Davis, Draymond, a guy who can get away from the basket. Marc Gasol.
Yeah.
Someone who can not have to stand underneath the basket like a Rudy Gobert has to.
Right.
I think that sort of player, and we've talked about this before, I don't know why we're going on and on about it again. That sort of player has a place in the NBA. I don't think it's a place with max money, though.
This is today's feature of the Rudy Gobert Show.
This is like the third time we've talked about Rudy Gobert. I think the last time we got really heated, so let's try and not do that again. Because Weston's an idiot. Okay.
No, you gave him credit, though. I appreciate that.
I like Rudy Gobert.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't pay him max money. Okay. Next up, I guess the next trade was the Rubio trade. So, it looked like a team with a big four of Towns, Wiggins, Jimmy Butler, and Rubio would be really great because Rubio doesn't have to worry about being a primary offensive option. He can just dish it around. But they traded him for a first rounder. This was really surprising to me. You have any thoughts? This isn't quite as big as the previous one we just talked about.
No, it's not quite as big, but honestly, I think they just really were trying to get, kind of like how the Magic did during Dwight's last few years. I think they just tried to get in everybody Gordon Hayward liked. And he apparently was really good friends with Ricky Rubio and always wanted to play with him. And they had a 3.5-hour meeting, and Rubio was there. They re-signed Joe Ingles, and I guess, they're like, okay, there's a better chance of him staying if Rubio comes in. And I think they're just really trying to convince him to stay, and it's just...
Now, I do like this move for the Jazz, just because they give up a first-round pick. I think they're going to be at least decent next year. So if it's a lottery pick, it's going to be like a 13th, 14th, 15th pick most likely. And those picks, I would rather have Rubio than one of those picks. Rubio can be a serviceable point guard in the league, and he's younger than most people think he is. He's like 26, 27.
Absolutely.
So I still think the Jazz will be good. It's a shame. And I didn't realize that Gordon Hayward and Rubio were friends.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that's a wrinkle that makes me side more with the Jazz on this, where it's a desperation play to try and keep.
You're really
Hayward.
trying to keep your star right there.
And that's, I can respect that. That's fine. You got to do what you got to do. But I still think this trade, if I was the Timberwolves, I wouldn't have done it. Just because I think Rubio would be a really good point guard on this team. But, I mean, Rajon Rondo's a free agent. They could always get him. Derrick Rose is a free agent, but I wouldn't be signing him.
I wouldn't either.
Especially considering you have Jimmy Butler on your team.
Right.
But, yeah, I think it's a decent trade both ways. But
I think it could potentially be a shrewd move for the Timberwolves. I think this is one of the things Thibodeau was thinking, and he's made a couple good moves being president this year, but we'll see in the long run if it works out. But I think they really were thinking Gordon Hayward was leaving and that the Jazz were going to fall apart. So they're thinking that's potentially going to be a really high pick.
Which is a fine way to think, but I think the Jazz are good enough. I mean, considering the West is really good, I can see several teams that were below the Jazz that are going to be better this year.
Right.
Sneak peek here, you got the Thunder. The Timberwolves
Nuggets
will probably be better. The Nuggets have a good shot to be better.
The Kings are going to be better. They're
going to
be better.
Have a chance. We're going to get there.
Yeah,
Don't you worry.
Okay. Y'all mentioned to talk about the Kings.
But I guess it's a decent gamble on the Timberwolves' part. I don't know. I don't see the Jazz as completely falling apart just from losing Hayward, but I guess we'll see. They're definitely going to be worse. They won't be the 4 seed again, I can tell you that.
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely true.
All right. The next huge deal. The shocking deal. The horrible deal. That would be for one, Paul George for Oladipo and Sabonis.
And the key kicker here is the Thunder clear a crap ton of future cap space by getting rid of Oladipo.
What the heck?
Basically, what would sum this up is a tweet from Evan Fournier, which I loved and retweeted on our Twitter account.
That's at the Rollout Show.
At the Rollout Show. The tweet was VO and Sabonis for PG ? Or VO and Sabonis. I think I've seen this before. ... Which is the exact same thing Rob Hennigan gave up, except adding also other stuff into that for just Serge Ibaka. So instead, they get Paul George for what they really got for trading Serge Ibaka.
So basically, they flipped Serge Ibaka for Paul George.
They flipped 1 year of Serge Ibaka for
1 year of Paul George. Now, this trade is ridiculous for a number of reasons. And I mean from the Pacers part.
Yeah.
If you're the Pacers, they had other suitors, by the way. They definitely had I've heard that the Celtics were really pushing hard for Paul George. I've heard that the Cavs were really interested in Paul George.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, the Celtics, Bill Simmons kind of thing. So he's not always 100% accurate because he talks with his heart. But according to him, there were draft day discussions, and they were really close.
Apparently they were really close, but from what I heard, it was all of the lower picks that the Celtics had. So it'd be like picks in like the late 20s.
I would rather have that than 1 year of Victor Oladipo.
Oh, it's 4 years of Oladipo, though. They signed him to a contract extension once he got traded over, because he was supposed to be a free agent this year, but he's making $22 million a year now.
Why?
Because for some reason, people love them
like
some
Serge
Victor.
Ibaka.
People love them some Victor Oladipo.
He's not good.
He is a solid sixth man on a team that can do a little bit of everything, and that's what he was brought into to the Thunder to do.
He's a solid 6, 7, 8 guy. He's a role player on a good team. You don't pay a role player $22 million. Anyway, so the Pacers basically they had better offers than this. They had to have better offers than this. I refuse to believe this was their best offer. I've heard that maybe oh gosh, I don't remember their GM's name.
The Pacers?
Yeah.
Kevin Pritchard is their president now.
Thank you, Pritchard. I've heard that Pritchard didn't want to trade him to the East out of spite because he wanted him to have to go to a loaded. I've heard that he didn't go to the Cavs because he didn't want him to get a championship out of spite, and he didn't send him to the East because he didn't want to have to play him 4 times.
Oh, and then there's also the whole fact that the Cavs don't even have a general manager right now. And it's like Dan Gilbert and an assistant GM just trying to make phone calls and make things happen, which is another thing we can talk about, which is kind of they need to figure that out. But
yep. Well, I think they were counting on Chauncey Billups, and Chauncey Billups backed out of the
deal.
Yeah, he said he wasn't interested anymore, which, I mean, good on Chauncey Billups. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. You're going to hurt your legacy.
Right.
But, yeah. So the Thunder, all of a sudden, they're going to make the playoffs next year.
Are back.
And this is probably only a 1 year thing. So if you're the Thunder, you have 1 year of Russell Westbrook left. You have these guys that aren't very good, and you need to clear some cap space. So you flip them for 1 year of Paul George. Worst case scenario, Russell Westbrook and Paul George leave next year. You've got a ton of cap space, and you've got some room to maneuver in the future, and you don't have to worry about what to do with Westbrook going forward. Because eventually they're going to get to a point in his career where the questions are going to start being raised. Can you win with Russell Westbrook? I think those questions should be raised now, but they're not really. Anyway, best case scenario, they win 55 games next year. They're a 3 or 4 seed, and Westbrook and Paul George really mesh well together. And they're like, you know what?
Let's keep it going.
We got a good team around us, a young team around us with Canner and Adams and everyone else whose names I don't know. Let's.
I like how you picked the two centers, the one that can play defense and the one that can score.
If they were the same player, they would be great.
Oh my gosh, they'd be like Rudy Gobert.
No, because Canner's way better than Gobert offensively. Anyway, it'd be like a more athletic Marc Gasol. How about that?
Okay.
Will you take that?
I'll take that.
Acceptable?
Yeah. Oh, that's acceptable.
That's the best case scenario, and then they both want to re-sign. So if you're the Thunder, why not gamble?
Yeah, I mean, you're really not losing anything, and then you get out from under Oladipo's contract, and I think they saw enough of Sabonis to realize, you know what, he's not that great, but for some reason, people still keep believing he's great, and the same thing with Oladipo. People keep believing there's more there, and
it's because there's
I personally
flashes.
don't.
Any guy that has flashes of greatness, you want to believe in.
And I think it also helps out that he was the number 2 overall pick in a draft. So I feel like a lot of people were like, oh, you know, he was just toiling away in Orlando, and they just mismanaged him, and that's the issue.
And then he couldn't play with the Thunder because of Russell Westbrook. He'll be great with us.
He'll be great with us. We're going to build around him. And I'm like,
yeah, we'll see.
I mean, we'll see. You know what? Maybe Victor's still young. He's got a lot of experience in the league now, but, I mean, we'll see.
I think the Thunder will be good next year. I'm curious how Westbrook and Paul George play together, because Westbrook and KD sort of played well together, but KD was a much more passive player than Paul George is. Paul George wants the ball in the last 2 minutes of the game.
Oh, he's made that perfectly clear.
He loves hero ball at the end. And Russell Westbrook also loves hero ball at the end. So we'll see how that goes.
It fits with that team, because what did that team in last year of him and KD was they both reverted to hero ball.
Because that's all they knew how to do. And that's
they got
sort
pressured, their instincts came through, and it was like
that's sort of a detriment to the coaching too. Granted, that was Billy Donovan's first year there.
I mean,
but still, you have to have plays ready for those moments.
And I mean, maybe
he did. And they just ignored
it. I mean, that's honestly what I think happened. Is they started feeling the footsteps and then caved. That's honest. I really don't put that on Billy Donovan.
I mean, it's hard to, especially in only 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's tough to install a whole system and mindset and culture in only 1 season.
Right, especially when the 2 biggest cornerstones had been playing together for years. And I mean, honestly, he did really well there regular season and up through the playoffs. It's just crunch time.
You revert back to what you know. Yep.
Exactly.
Same reason Team Tebow doesn't have a job in the NFL. Always bring it back
One
to
of the
football.
reasons. All right, Skip Bayless.
All right.
Bring up Tebow.
We'll talk about the Warriors really quick.
Okay.
Steph Curry gets the Supermax. 5 years, $201 million. I think that is the most total money contract in NBA history.
Right, it is now.
That is a huge amount of money. And
that's massive.
Congrats to Steph, because he's been underpaid the last 3 seasons. Massively underpaid. I think he's been the 5th highest paid. I think because Andre Iguodala, Clay, and Draymond and KD all made more than him last year. So good for Steph. I'm happy for him. He got paid. They re-signed Sean Livingston. We weren't sure that was going to happen, just because I'm sure he had suitors out there to be a starter or more than just like a 7th, 8th guy. But good.
Right.
He re-signed, got a little bit of money. Andre Iguodala got paid. He got 3 years, $49 million?
Something like, I know it's between 14 and 16 a season.
Yeah. So I know he had other suitors.
Oh, he definitely did.
Everyone thought he was going to leave, and then he stayed. So
Well, think about all the different. He was really aggressive trying to go there and go out and get other meetings. Like he had meetings in Philadelphia. He had a meeting in Houston, San Antonio. I mean, he was going everywhere.
And it's interesting because I know we've had the discussion about can they re-sign everybody, and they did. But we'll move to KD in a second. But if you're Iguodala, you've had 2 finals, you got a finals MVP. What else is there for you to do in Golden State other than accumulate rings? Why wouldn't you want to go somewhere where you can be the number 2, number 3 guy and also compete? But I mean, I guess it's like KD has said before, it's just a place that's really fun to play. Why wouldn't you want to play somewhere so much fun?
I guess so. And remember, there were rumblings because back even before Mark Jackson got there, that's when Iguodala signed the massive contract to come to Golden State, and he was the guy they were all building around. And then he got relegated to the bench. And do you remember there were like really rumblings that Iguodala wanted out, and he wasn't buying in and everything. And then playoff time came around. It was with Mark Jackson back then. They started having some success, and he started buying in, and then they just grew from there.
Yep. And this whole team, basically, not so much anymore because they have Kevin Durant, but before the last few years, before Kevin Durant got there, it was really centered around that second unit. Like the first unit was great with Steph and Clay and Draymond eventually. Before that, it was David Lee. But that second unit would come in and be plus like 15 by the time they got off the floor. And a lot of that was because you had a guy like Andre Iguodala who would be a starter on most teams.
And Livingston.
But he's coming in, and Livingston. And they're both coming in fresh with your second unit. There's nothing you have no backups that can compete with that.
Exactly. And then even Barbosa, when he was there as like the third string point guard, would come in there and then would just attack. And it was ridiculous because they still have like Iguodala and Livingston there now, but that was kind of, it shows the difference in the team because they were like an all depth team because like they would just attack you no matter who was on the floor.
Now they've got like 6 or 7 guys, and then they get the 1-year veterans to come.
The 1-year veterans,
and speaking of which, they re-signed David West. They signed someone else whose name I don't remember. It doesn't really matter. The big move, though, the move that I was shocked to see was Kevin Durant signed for 2 years, only $56 million. That is about a $15 million a season clip of what he could have made. Like, the max is closer to $40 million a year.
Oh, it is, because that's what Steph got.
Yeah, Steph's getting $40 million a year. What KD was not lying when he said he'd take a pay cut to play for the Warriors.
None of us really thought he was that serious.
I mean, I thought he'd take the sort of pay cut where it'd be 2 years, $68 million, where he's still making $34 million a year, but he's $4 or $5 million under the max kind of thing. Let them get a little bit of wiggle room to sign Swaggy P kind of thing.
Something, like using exceptions and veteran minimum deals to bring people in.
Like David West. But no, he took a huge pay cut. It was shocking. I know we texted immediately about it just because this may, other than the Paul George deal, may have been the most surprising thing so far this offseason.
It really was because, there was like, Steph was out there and he's like, I may consider a slight pay cut or something, to keep everybody together, but was like, we're like, okay, Steph is not taking a pay cut. Like, that's for real.
To be fair to Steph, he's been underpaid for a while now.
Exactly. That's why most people are like, Steph may say that to kind of look good, but if he's taking a pay cut, he may take $1 million less.
And he did not take a pay cut.
No, he did not take a pay cut.
He got the Supermax.
He's the first one to ever get the Supermax.
And it is a large amount of money.
See,
good for him.
See, I knew Mike Conley would only be the highest paid for one season. Only one. And now there's like 3 guys ahead of him. So there you go.
All right. I don't want to stay on the Warriors too long because there's so much for us to talk about. The next most shocking thing that happened, Blake Griffin. 5 years, $173 million to stay with the Clippers.
Great transition there because of the people that are paid ahead of Mike Conley now. I was going to say Steph is probably the only one that's really, really deserving of it. And case in point,
Blake
Griffin here is nuts.
So I guess they're going to try the whole Point Blake thing. They're going to try and run the offense through Blake. We'll see. I mean, he's not even going to be healthy until mid-December or so he's going to miss a month or two. The Clippers have a chance to be bad next year, which is really shocking considering how close they've been to a championship the last few years. Mainly like
arguably
3
one
years
of the
ago.
most talented rosters in the NBA.
At least starting 5.
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
most people would say they were the most talented starting 5 3 or 4 years ago. Just no depth. That team, I mean, trading Chris Paul away for pieces, role players, it's a tough one, but I guess if Chris Paul's going to leave anyway, you might as well do it. But why sign Blake Griffin to that deal? Like, I thought he was gone for sure because he keeps getting hurt.
And he keeps butting heads with different people in the organization. Was it last year or the season before he punched somebody and hit a wall and broke his hand?
Yep.
I mean, like the writing was on the wall. And then also, you have DeAndre Jordan there and locked in after, you all got together and convinced him to not sign in Dallas after locking him in his house. Yeah. And then now Chris Paul leaves and you're like, okay, well, you assume they would keep Chris Paul because he's your guard, your facilitator. And then Blake Griffin.
He's the Hall of Famer of the group.
Right. And then Blake Griffin is the oft-injured guy who's really, really kind of similar to DeAndre Jordan, but probably a little bit more athletic and can move a little further out.
I don't know if that is fair. I mean, Blake Griffin's got a decent mid-range game.
He's got a decent mid-range game. He's got a good post game. But
all DeAndre Jordan can do offensively is dunk. To be fair to Blake Griffin, he
dunks and layups, like close to the basket.
Offensively, Blake Griffin is significantly better than DeAndre Jordan.
But both prefer to be back to the basket kind of guys.
And both have sort of gotten worse the last couple years.
Absolutely.
I would never sign a guy to what's essentially a supermax. I mean, it's less money than Steph, but
that's the highest he could possibly get on the market.
Is it because of how
the All NBA teams and how that works out?
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would never give a guy that much money who is always injured and every year for the past 3 years has been getting worse. That's not a good sign. Like, you got to change something. And I would have preferred to see Blake Griffin start over somewhere else, like the Heat. That's where I really thought he was going. But we'll see. It's interesting. I was shocked.
I was really shocked when that came across. I think Steve Ballmer is kind of desperate to try to keep the star power there, and I guess he kind of looks at it more of like a family, try to keep everybody together.
Well, Steve Ballmer also wants his own stadium, right? He's got to keep.
He's trying to team up.
Stadium.
He's trying to team up with Kroenke, same area.
He needs this team to stay relevant. So I understand from a financial perspective why you would do this, because the last thing you want to do right now, as the Lakers seem to be gaining traction with this whole Paul George thing, and maybe LeBron will come to LA to play for the Lakers, the last thing you want to do is lose relevance as the Lakers are getting good again. Because sure, you've been the team in LA for the last few years for once in your entire franchise history, but if the Lakers get good again and you aren't competitive, you're going to lose that real quick.
Oh, yeah, you're definitely going to lose it real quick. And that's, I think, one of the main reasons they brought in Jerry West.
Yeah, which I think is a good thing. Jerry West has been amazing everywhere he's gone.
He really has, but we'll see what actually happens with it. And kind of skipped over a move that you didn't really like.
Oh, Drew Holiday.
5 and 126.
Drew Holiday is a fine player. He's probably somewhere between like 12 and 16th best point guard. You don't pay that guy 5 years, 126.
I think he's a little overpaid, and I rate him a little higher than you do. I kind of see more in him than you do, but I can kind of understand because he kind of has the same thing with Blake Griffin going on because he is kind of oft injured. But I think it's really more of New Orleans as a whole as not being a great free agent destination.
I understand the point of you have a point guard who plays pretty well with these big guys that are your cornerstone, and you're probably not going to be able to get anyone better, so you might as well lock them up.
Right.
And it's also like you need to appease Anthony Davis. Anything Anthony Davis wants, you need
or
to
Boogie,
get.
and if him
Or
and
Boogie for
get
that
along,
matter.
yeah,
But I
because
think
Boogie's up for a contract sooner.
I think they're sort of understanding that if they aren't really good this year, Boogie's probably going to leave because he's not going to think the two Twin Towers type thing is going to work. Anthony Davis is the cornerstone of that franchise. Another oft-injured guy. But I don't know how tight Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis are. Judging by this contract, I would assume they're pretty tight. So from that perspective, I get it. It's just, again, if I was an executive of an NBA team, I would never lock myself up. Maybe if you're going to do like a 2 or 3 year max money type deal to see where this team is headed, I wouldn't want to lock myself into a guy for 5 years that I don't think is a superstar.
I think what it really comes down to is they used his bird rights and everything to sign him, so they were able to give the extra year. He had a lot of suitors on the market. I mean, there were a lot of people that were in on him. And
he's another one of those guys like Ibaka that people seem to think is better than he actually is, in my opinion. Yeah. I know you think he's better than me. I think he's a decent point guard. Like, if I had to choose between Drew Holiday and the Goran Dragic, it'd be a tough choice for me.
It'd be a tough choice for you.
That's like the average of the average point guard.
It'd be a tough choice for you. I would definitely pick Drew. Maybe not contract-wise, I would pick Drew, but if we're just going player for player, I'd probably pick Drew. But
why?
I mean,
Dragic can shoot. Anyway.
Whatever. But honestly, and because there were a lot of rumors, like for even the past 2 years, that Drew was just waiting to get out. But I think there was a lot of off-the-court stuff that went on because he missed basically the entire first half of the season, and the Pelicans allowed him to do that because he had Did you hear about the stuff with his wife? Did you know about that?
Remind me.
His wife, they were expecting it's either their first or second child, and while they're doing like different tests, they found out she had a brain tumor while she was pregnant.
That's right.
So he, I think, really decided they wanted to stay in New Orleans as kind of. I mean, they paid him, but he also wanted to be loyal to them because they were loyal to him and allowed him to miss all that time to care for his wife and
That's cool.
child. Yeah.
That's cool. And I mean, that's sad. It's really sad. But let's not get too emotional here.
Well, both
now
have recovered.
I feel bad criticizing
both
him.
are recovered, and he seems to be excited to get back on the court. And he kind of had his best season of his career last year. So
okay. Well, I'm rooting for him. He's
a good guy.
I like that team. I think it's interesting just for the fact of it's completely different than what everyone else in the NBA is trying to do. Whereas they basically have no shooters, and everyone else in the league is going shooter heavy. So I find this team interesting. I'd like to see them succeed and get to the playoffs, so we see how they match up against some of these shooter heavy teams. But yeah, okay.
See,
that's good for Drew Holiday. We spent way too long on Drew Holiday.
JJ Redick, the 1-year massive deal to go to the Sixers.
I hit my microphone. Yeah,
your favorite player.
I think this is a great move for the 76ers. The 76ers have been in tank mode for the last 5 seasons, and they are all really young. JJ Redick is a guy who has been in the league for a while, is a good scorer, and I think will be a good mentor for a lot of these younger guys. You pay him, you're paying him way too much money with $23 million, but it's only 1 season, and you have the cap space anyway. And it's not like you're planning on going for it this season. You're going to need to groom these younger guys, make sure they can all stay healthy. I think it's a great move to get a little bit of veteran presence in that locker room. Because, I mean, sure, Ben Simmons and Fultz may be great, but they're rookies. And Embiid might as well be a rookie because he's played like 30 games. You need a little bit of maturity in that locker room, and I think it's a good move for the 76ers.
I absolutely love it because it brings in a high-level free agent, because a lot of people were in on JJ Redick, and brings him to a young team. He can help mentor and just basically do what he does.
And it's a team where JJ Redick can shoot 8 threes a game and not worry about it.
Absolutely.
Which is what you want JJ Redick to be doing, because he's one of the best shooters in the league.
That's what you want him to do, and I love that they're able to get him on a 1-year deal. Him and Amir Johnson, they signed basically back-to-back. Both guys who are like older guys in the league, but can still do a lot of things well. And then Amir Johnson can provide some defense and also some leadership, as well as
and I think the big
JJ.
Thing is the leadership that they're looking for with these guys. And I don't know as much about Amir Johnson, but I know JJ is he wasn't a huge piece of that Clippers team, but he was a big part of the locker room.
Oh, absolutely.
He was an emotional and mental leader for that team. So that's the sort of thing you want to bring in to your organization when it's full of rookies, essentially.
And now you move back to the Eastern Conference, and you're back on a young team.
That had to be part of it. That's one thing I want to get to. Might as well, since you just transitioned us there.
Why not? Let's go.
Why are all of these high-profile people signing in the West? Why would you ever move from the East to the West unless you're a veteran going to play for the Warriors or the Spurs?
Honestly, the one person who I give really a pass on that is Paul Millsap, because I wholeheartedly believe he wanted to stay in the East. He wanted to stay right where he was.
Well, he got traded.
Well, it was a sign and trade, but they didn't even offer him a contract. He came out and said, I wanted to stay in Atlanta, but Atlanta didn't even want me to stay. So,
but there's nowhere in the East you can go.
Nobody in the East was really offering him.
And if that's the case, that's fair. If I'm a free agent, so if I'm Gordon Hayward, and I can either stay with the Jazz and get beat in 4 games again by the Warriors, or I can go to, you could have even gone to the Heat, but since he signed with the Celtics, we'll go with the Celtics. And you're going to make it minimum to the Eastern Conference Finals. Why wouldn't you? It's why? George Hill's another guy. There had to have been someone in the East that wanted your services.
I think George Hill just saw the check and was like, let's do it.
No, but George Hill also had a really good season, so I feel like there had to have been somebody in the East that would have paid him that.
I guess they just really sold him on what they want to do in Sacramento.
The Knicks wouldn't have paid him that much, or I don't know. Maybe he believes in Sacramento. Maybe he wanted to live in California. I don't know. It's just weird to me that I feel like all these big name guys are going to the West, and the East is kind of barren.
I think that's really the more and more. That's why I know on the last podcast and podcast before, I was just saying I expect him to stay in Utah. That was before all this movement to the West happened.
Well,
and then
you have Paul George, Paul Millsap.
All that stuff happened. Chris Paul to the Rockets.
Yep.
Because the Clippers are going to be worse, but the Rockets just got a whole lot better, potentially.
The Rockets should be the second best team in the West next year.
The Timberwolves and everything, and then you have, Portland, who I expect to rebound, because they had really, basically everything went wrong for them last season.
But they still had a good season.
And they still got the 8th seed. They still had a good season.
Making the playoffs in the West is an accomplishment. In the East, you can have a 500 record and get in the playoffs.
But honestly, in the East, I can think of... There's basically a few teams I think are locks to make the playoffs. Cavs, Celtics, Wizards, Raptors.
Assuming health.
Yeah. Assuming health, absolutely. Bucks. And after that, who else? You can probably the Pistons, probably the Hornets. The Heat. The Heat most likely. If last season was any indication, the Heat.
Yeah, I would say the Heat before the Hornets.
Yeah, the talent level.
But it's like those teams would all get crushed in the West.
Oh, absolutely.
This is also the reason why I think the playoffs should be 1 through 16 instead of divided into conferences, but that's just me.
Hey.
All right, we should move on because we still have stuff to get through. Kyle Lowry. Everyone thought he was going to the Spurs or the Timberwolves or somewhere like that. He resigns for 3 years, $100 million. So good for Kyle Lowry. Gets
good for
paid.
Kyle.
I like Kyle Lowry. I wish he could show up in the playoffs for once, but last year obviously wasn't his fault, but there's no excuse for the years before that.
I think it was cool that they all bought in and decided to stay, because Ibaka also re-signed to see if they can actually get really a first chance to see what that team can do all together.
And then the big one that we mentioned, but the biggest free agent this summer seemed to be Gordon Hayward. And the winner of the Gordon Hayward sweepstakes is his old college coach, Brad Stevens, and the Celtics, which it seemed to be between the Jazz and the Celtics coming towards the end, and I don't blame him for picking the Celtics. It's a team in the East. He's guaranteed to make the Eastern Conference Finals. He gets to play with a dynamic scorer in Isaiah Thomas. He gets his old coach back. He's on a more national team, so he should get more media recognition and notice. So he'll probably make an All-NBA team next year, I would guess.
It'll be easier for him to start his own hair product line.
He's got great hair.
I
Agreed.
mean, I'm really trying to get his hair. I'm going out to Utah in August, and now I guess I can't go into the barber shop and ask for the Gordon Hayward anymore. That's going to be a little sad.
Ooh, that'll be an awkward situation.
That's going to be an awkward situation. But I do like the fact that the report that he had signed leaked, and then his agent really came out and like pumped the brakes on it. And even though I think we're all pretty sure at this point the deal was done, his agent pumped the brakes on it because Hayward wanted to announce it himself with the article he was writing.
But
on
why
the Players
does it
Tribune.
Matter?
I mean,
like,
it does.
So
it matters to fans, though.
Was the notification came out that he's gonna sign with the Celtics, and his agent's like, no, that's not
nothing
true.
Is fine. He said nothing is finalized yet, which I mean, really, it isn't because it's not an official deal until after the moratorium is lifted.
But he clearly already decided. Why
he wanted to announce it himself. I mean, I super respect that because he wanted to thank the Jazz fans for everything he did and explain why he did it.
I agree. And I think the letter's cool, and I that's the reason I like the Players Tribune. But there's no need for the agent to be like, it's all lies, it's all lies.
He didn't say it's all lies. He said nothing is finalized yet. That was the
implication.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the perfect thing for an agent to do. This clearly was meant a big deal to Gordon, and he wanted to do this. And then when a report gets leaked, I mean, the agent's not going to be like, you're right.
Yeah, I guess in the end, it actually doesn't matter at all.
Yeah,
we're making a big deal about nothing.
He's just representing his client the way he wants to be.
I agree, and I really like the Players Tribune. I think that's awesome that he was able to have a platform to write this letter that everyone would see.
Shout out to Derek Jeter.
Yeah, shout out to Derek Jeter. Yeah, that's basically it. This morning, it looks like Avery Bradley got traded for Marcus Morris to the Pistons so they could clear enough space to actually sign Gordon Hayward. So that's good.
That's good. You have Rudy Gay going to the Spurs.
That's a good signing. Rudy Gay used to be really good, and when players go to the Spurs, they usually play even better. So
especially like when you try to sign Greg Popovich as your coach on 2K. You get to see that he's the rejuvenator, so he really fixes those old guys and brings them back to life.
Always goes back to 2K.
That's always goes back to 2K. And speaking of old guys and bringing to life, Dirk Nowitzki signing 2 years, $10 million.
Well, yeah, we all knew he was gonna re-sign there.
I mean, him and
Cuban are best buds, basically.
They're pretty much best buds, and he really wants to stay in Dallas. He doesn't want to play anywhere else. I mean, Dallas is his town.
And he doesn't have that much longer left. He's almost done.
And I think they kind of had the understanding even last season when certain moves didn't work out that they're trying to go for, and they had the extra cap space. They gave it to Dirk just as a token of, hey, thank you for being loyal to us. And then Dirk's kind of like, I'm going to get you on the next one when we can make some moves next offseason.
Which is cool. I like Dirk a lot. And I actually think Cuban is a good owner. I don't always like him as a person, but
yeah, he's very loyal to his guys.
As an NBA owner, and I like that because usually in sports, owners are very disloyal. They'll trade players as soon as they're no longer useful, which is a smarter thing to do. But I like a little loyalty, and that's cool that Dirk is getting this kind of treatment after all he's done for that organization.
And it's really a good indication of how people view him as an owner, and they more view him as a friend, I think, because even Chandler Parsons, even though he left, he's like, oh, me and Mark Cuban still hang out. We're still like best friends. And even players that have left Dallas, I mean, you see that happening. Even Darren Williams loved being in Dallas after they finally got him, after he chose the Nets when he was still really, really good. He went
we all thought he was really, really good.
We all thought he was really, really good. And then he signed with Dallas, and then, Cuban goes to him and is like, look, we'll buy you out right now, and you can go try to get a ring. Let's do it. And then he did the same thing with Richard Jefferson. Richard Jefferson agreed to go there, And then he got an offer from the Cavs, and Mark Cuban's like, if you think that's your best chance to win, we respect you for wanting to sign here, but you can go over there.
Yeah, that's cool. Good old Mark Cuban.
Good old Mark Cuban. He did not like DeAndre Jordan's move because that was really shady.
That was pretty shady.
That was because that kept them from making other moves had they known.
It's also dumb that you have to do these handshake deals instead of actually sign them. But
right.
Anyway, I think that's pretty much it.
You got Vince Carter going to the Kings.
Yeah.
Grit and grind ball moving west.
Zebo going to the Kings as well. That team's really old now. You got
really old and really young.
Really old and really young. No in between. You had James Johnson and Waiters Island re-sign with the Heat, so the Heat basically remain intact. We'll see. They'll probably be like a 6 to 4 seed in the East next year, and not win anything. So, who cares? They needed a free agent or a trade, and they haven't been able to do that yet. That's why I really thought they were going to get Blake Griffin, but I guess Pat Riley couldn't close the deal.
Well, I think it was more of Blake Griffin saw the massive check. It's like, true. All right, because he didn't even talk to anybody else. Yeah. They just threw that offer at him. He's like, well, this is the most money I'm going to get.
I was not expecting this. You idiots.
Steve Ballmer. You don't know business.
You don't know business.
You're paying that much for me? Are you kidding? Yes, please.
Didn't
I'll
we
sign
talk
right
before
now.
about how, as a business decision, it was pretty smart, but as a basketball decision, it was
really dumb? Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, how are we doing on time?
We're pretty close to the end, but something that kind of came across here recently, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, his qualifying offer was pulled from the Pistons, which basically means he's done in Detroit. They no longer have the rights to match any offer he gets, so he's an unrestricted free agent, which...
I guess they did that because they have Avery Bradley.
Right, and they're up against the cap anyway, so they have Avery Bradley now, and we'll see what Van Gundy has planned, and we'll see how much money KCP gets paid, which is probably going to be a lot.
If you say so.
Hey, he should be your favorite player. You know what school he went to, right?
Did he go to Georgia?
He went to Georgia. He's like
they have basketball players in the NBA.
He's the one basketball guy to come out of Georgia.
He's my new favorite player.
Exactly.
You're gonna give me a KCP jersey.
That's right. For wherever he signs, gonna be your new favorite team. KCP on the Suns. All right, woo! Bradley's a Suns fan now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Is there that was a long list of moves.
That was a long list of moves. We're at 53 minutes right now, but we've basically gotten through everything. We have like the stories of Chris Bosh getting his number retired.
Oh, yeah, we should talk about that. Chris Bosh, most of you should know that he had a blockage in his heart, right?
Blood clot issues
in his heart.
Yes.
And he hasn't been able to play for the last 3 seasons. He was great. I would have loved to have seen him on this year's Heat. He really wanted to play. He found like a doctor or two that would clear him, but the Heat wouldn't let him play because there was a chance he could die if he played. So they're going to retire his number 1 jersey, which is cool. He wasn't with the Heat for incredibly long. I think he only played like 6 seasons or so, but he was an important emotional part of that team. He was a really important part for those 2 championships they won with LeBron. I would say he was more important than Dwayne Wade during those seasons. But yeah, I think it's just a classy, cool move by the Heat and Pat Riley, especially because of how badly he wanted to play these last couple years, and the Heat basically saved him from himself.
Yeah, and it's also because the relationship seemed to sour a little bit because, I mean, it was shocking that happened. It just came out of nowhere, and Chris Bosh was really, really good still. And he was
still in his prime.
He's still in his prime, and then you get told, no, you can't play. Oh, well, I'm playing. What are you talking about? I feel great. And it's like, dude, you can't play.
You might die if you play. And I bet, I don't know if he's still sour. I'm sure looking back, Chris Bosh will be grateful for the Heat and Pat Riley for doing that, saving him from himself, because it's the same thing as back to football. In the NFL, you got to save players from themselves.
Like Wes Welker.
When they have concussions, they're going to lie and say they don't have a concussion. That's why you have to ignore what they say and just go off their symptoms and protect them from themselves.
Exactly, like the case with Zach Orr, who at the beginning of the offseason, linebacker with the Ravens, retired, and then is now deciding to come back because one doctor told him his neck injury, if he played again, would probably kill him. And then he went to a different doctor, and that doctor said, no, you might be all right, or something. Now he's like debating on whether to come back, and
that's that like 24-year-old
mid linebacker. Yeah, I feel bad for him because of that injury, but it's like, which doctor do you believe? And if you're a team, do you really want to sign him and take that risk, or do you want to protect?
Him play?
Exactly.
I mean, I'm sure it's like the Heat would have loved to have, if the Heat had Chris Bosh this year, they would have made the playoffs easily.
Easily, yes.
But some things are more important than basketball or football. Health is, and they have to stay healthy, and you have to protect them from themselves.
And you have to think about his kids and everything too, his wife and kids, and he's got I'd say a very lucrative broadcasting career coming up, because from the early things I've seen of him, he's been very, very good on TNT.
And that's good. It's nice when players, especially when they have to leave early, have other great talents that they can fall back on that are still sort of adjacent to the industry.
Right.
Because you would hate to like not be good at broadcasting, and now do you have enough money to float for the rest of your life? Do you have to go back to
school? Or do you have other business interests or everything?
Were you smart enough to invest your money and you have more money now? I mean, it's all got to be a weird situation to be like, I played for a couple years, so I got a couple million, but that's not necessarily enough to float me for the rest of my life. And I spent a little too much as a rookie because I was young. And
that's exactly the case. Like going back to Zach Orr, that's probably the situation he's in. He's like, look, I'm 24. I wasn't a first-round pick or anything, so it's not like I made mega money or anything like that. Do I have enough money to survive me the rest of my life, or do I want to try one more time?
Even if you're a first-round pick who made $10 to $15 million a year, how did you use that money? Did you buy every member of your family a house? All of a sudden, you have no money left because you were expecting more contracts.
Because even some of the guys that are like fourth-round picks will do that, and then you look up and it's like, wow, I already spent all of my money.
That's why so many players end up going broke. That's why you got to listen to Marshawn Lynch's advice and open a 401k. Got to open that Roth IRA. You know what I'm talking about? Actually,
yeah, bro.
Athletes making that much money would not qualify to open a Roth IRA. They'd have to open a traditional IRA and then do a backdoor to convert it to a Roth. Anyway, there's your personal finance lesson for the day, kids.
And that is Bradley on finance.
The worst segment of all time.
The worst segment in our sports podcast.
Wow.
Yeah, sorry, I ran out of air and it sounded more angry.
Very angry. I mean, we're going to go a little long, but there's one thing I want to talk about.
Zebo getting his number retired as well.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Grind culture.
I'm happy for Zebo.
I am very happy for Zebo.
Out of the teams that are so a bunch of the teams that were bad in the West got better. The Kings, the Thunder, the Timberwolves, arguably the Suns, but I still think they're really bad.
I think the Suns got better, but they know exactly what they're trying to do.
Yeah. And even the teams that got worse in the West, like the Clippers, the Jazz. And then another team that got better is the Nuggets. Out of those teams, in New Orleans, we'll throw New Orleans in here, that's sort of like
Kings.
The teams, I said Kings.
Oh, sorry.
You're okay. Out of the teams that are going to be competing for the, like, in the Portland, the teams that will be competing for the 8, 7, 6, maybe even 5 seeds in the West, who do you think is going to be the best, and who do you think is going to be the biggest disappointment?
Of the like mainstream teams, I want to buy back into Portland. I think everything really went wrong for them last season. I think they're going to be much better, especially with one full year of Nurkic being there. I think Portland's going to be better. They have more moves to make. Timberwolves, I think they're going to have a little bit of growing pains, so I think they'll probably be like around the 7 seed or something.
But you think they're going to make the playoffs?
I think they're going to make the playoffs.
Who do you think is going to be... Because the top 3 teams in the West are set. Who's the 4 seed? Because it has to be one of those teams. Because it's been the Clippers for the last few years, but it won't be them next year.
No, honestly...
Well, I guess it could be, but...
It could be. I don't even think the Clippers are making the playoffs next season.
Okay.
I know that may be a little bold and prisoner of the moment right now. I don't think they're making the playoffs.
I think a lot of that depends on Blake Griffin's health.
It really does, and I don't buy into Blake Griffin being healthy for a full season because we really haven't seen it.
Fair enough. Not for a while, anyway.
Not for a long time. I mean, we haven't seen it, and I don't necessarily buy into what they're trying to do there. You have like a lot of question marks and a lot of unknowns, and you're really hoping just things go your way. That's tough. I really think if I had to guess, I'd lean Thunder right now, taking 4.
That is exactly what I was going to say. So out of those teams, I think the worst is pretty clearly the Kings. As far as the 4 seed, I really like the Timberwolves. The problem is, I really liked the Timberwolves last year, and they were horrible.
Yes, absolutely.
Wiggins needs to improve. Towns needs to improve defensively. Jimmy Butler needs an attitude check. But I think he'll be good with Tibbs.
Thibodeau, yeah, I think that's already been hammered out.
Yeah, I hope so. I think people are sleeping on the Thunder now. Like, the Thunder have 2 of the best 10 players in the NBA. They're only one of 3 teams that have 2 of the best 10 players in the NBA. The other 2 being the Warriors and arguably the Cavs if you consider Kyrie top 10 like we do.
Absolutely.
When you have that much talent, we've talked about before how the NBA is a star-driven league.
Right.
It's a talent-driven league. If you have superstars, you're going to win. It's why even though Russell Westbrook was basically the whole Thunder team last year, they still made the playoffs. They have to be good next year. I don't see a way in which they can't win 50 regular season games. And I think as competitive as the West is going to be, that should be good for the 4 seed.
I think it should be good. They just need to find one shooter. A guy that, just spot up 3-point shooter. They need that guy.
They needed to sign a J.J. Redick
Right.
type
They didn't
guy.
have any kind of cap space to sign J.J. Redick, but you need some guy like that. Could be
and there
old,
may be one riding on their bench that they've just never played before.
Right, because they've always had other guys, and now that Oladipo's out of the way, maybe somebody steps up, but
I agree. Like a end of his career Ray Allen type guy that just stands in the corner and will shoot a 3.
Maybe like a Jamal Crawford or something.
Yeah,
Bring him in.
That would be a good signing.
If he gets bought out by the Hawks, which I think is probably a good chance of that happening.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I really want to say the Timberwolves. I think the Timberwolves will make the playoffs this year. I also think the Clippers will make the playoffs this year. I think they'll be better than people are expecting. Sort of. Well, you are expecting it.
Than I'm expecting. Yeah, I think I'm really low on the Clippers.
I think they're going to squeak in.
People.
I don't think they're going to be the 4 seed. I think they're going to be the 8 or 7 seed. The Kings aren't going to be as good. And the New Orleans. I don't believe in New Orleans till I see it. I am rooting for them to come in. I don't want them to be the 8 seed, obviously, because then they'll get thumped by the Warriors. But I would love to see them against the Rockets,
a 6 seed or something like that.
Yeah, like where they're playing a Rockets,
Spurs,
a Thunder,
or
a Spurs.
Thunder. Yeah, absolutely.
Not anyone but the Warriors. I would like to see it. I don't think it'll happen because they haven't been able to do it before. But yeah, I just thought that'd be an interesting topic. I don't know if you like it.
It's an interesting topic. I think I'm a little bit higher on the Kings than you are. I think they have a chance to squeak into the playoffs just because of. It's very unrealistic. I think they have a chance though because
the main piece that they added was George Hill.
Hill,
they added Zebo.
Randolph.
He can't play
very
many minutes.
They have really
Fox.
good for what he. It's more of a
It's
Dave
bias.
Yeager. It's a little bit of
there.
a Dave Yeager kind of thing because there were so many years that I thought the Grizzlies had really not a great chance of even making the playoffs, and then they'd be like the 5 seed.
But they also had Mike Conley, Marc Gasol.
True, very true.
And Zebo in more of his prime. Like this team, who's the best player on the Kings right now? Is it George Hill?
Buddy Hield?
It's okay, so it's either a third year guy now, I guess. Is this his second year?
Buddy Hield?
Yeah.
He's going into his second year.
Okay. So it's either a second year guy who has shown flashes, which is always nice, or George Hill.
Or we have to see, because we don't know. He's very, very highly touted from Europe, but Bogdanovic, not to be confused with Bojan Bogdanovic with the Wizards, but we'll see what he actually is, because they've been waiting for him to come over for a really long time, and he got the highest rookie deal ever. So
we'll see. I just think, given how tough the West is, the fact that your best player is probably going to be George Hill is not a good sign. As much depth as that team may have now, they got a lot of good players. They have a lot of role players.
They really do have a lot of good role players. And
they're hoping Fox can blossom into something great, but we'll see. All right, wrap us up. This has been too long.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us for episode 18.
Sure hope you like the NBA.
Yeah, we
probably
really hope
gonna do that next week too.
Yeah, we'll have more hard-hitting NBA news next week. We're gonna stop lying to you because, let's be honest, something big's probably gonna happen between this episode and the next one.
Someone's gonna get traded. Something's gonna happen.
Yeah, something major is going to happen.
Something may happen by the time we've recorded this.
And released
it the next day. So
it's probably going to be John Wall or something ridiculous, or sign an extension, or somebody crazy gets traded. I don't know, something.
We'll see.
We'll see. But thank you for joining us for episode 18, episode 18. Had to get that in there.
Nicely done.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Been working on my Spanish. My Espanol. Anyway, but thank you for joining us for episode 18. Reach out to us on Twitter, Instagram, all the socials. Thanks for joining us. We out.
See ya.
See ya.